At noon in Red Bluff, on the dry edge of New Mexico territory, 3 Apache sisters were forced onto an auction plank beside stolen saddles and half-starved mules. The men in the street laughed because they thought the sisters had already lost. Their wrists were bound with rawhide, dust stuck to the blood on their hands. A faded government blanket had been thrown over the youngest one's shoulders, like it could make the whole thing look lawful. But the oldest sister, Mara Red Willow, did not lower her eyes. She watched every bidder. She watched the man holding the ledger, silent gunman at the back of the crowd, the one with no brand on his horse, and no name anyone trusted enough to speak twice. His name was Elias Cade. He had ridden into Red Bluff that morning with a black hat, 2 worn revolvers, and the canvas pouch heavy enough to pull his coat to one side. He had come for ammunition, coffee, and nothing else. Then he saw the sisters. The middle one, Nita, stood stiff as a post, hiding fear behind a hard mouth. The youngest, Sela, only 19, kept her chin high, even while her fingers trembled. The auctioneer slapped his ledger shut. 3 Apache women, he called. Authority, sold for labor, sold as a lot. A ranch hand offered $40. Someone else offered $60. A drunk man near the water trough shouted something filthy, and the crowd broke into laughter. That was when Elias walked forward. No speech, no threat, no hero's flourish, just the sound of his boots in the dust. He untied the canvas pouch, dropped it on the plank, and silver spilled across the boards. Enough for all 3, he said. The laughter died. The auctioneer's face changed fast. Greed made him careful. He counted the coins, bit one, then cut the rawhide from the sisters' wrists, like he was releasing livestock. Elias turned away. Mara stepped close before he could reach his horse. Her voice was low enough that only he heard it. You should have asked why we let them sell us. Elias looked at her. Mara held up her bleeding hands. You did not buy a rescue gunman. You bought your way into our war. That night they hid in an abandoned blacksmith shop 2 miles beyond town. Wind pushed dust under the door. A dead forge sat cold in the corner. Elias cleaned the rope burns on Sela's wrists, while Nita watched him with a knife already hidden in her sleeve. Mara waited until the last lantern in Red Bluff disappeared behind the ridge. Then she told him the truth. My father is Chief Red Willow. He is dying. Before the next moon is gone, our band must choose who carries his voice. Elias did not answer. Mara continued. Our mother's brother, Ashhawk, wants that voice. He wants the valley, the horses, the trade route, everything. But our father named his daughters as the bloodline. Ashhawk could not break that in council. So he sold you, Elias said. Mara's eyes hardened. He sold us to make us disappear, to make the council say we were shamed, lost, outside the circle. Nita leaned toward the lantern, but he made one mistake. Elias looked from one sister to the next. Sela swallowed, then said, In our band, before a chief dies, a daughter may hold the line if a sworn husband stands beside her before the council fire, not because he rules her, because he witnesses her claim and takes the danger with her. Elias let out a tired breath. There are plenty of Apache men who could do that. Mara shook her head. Not anymore. Ashhawk has frightened them, bought them, or sent them away. Anyone inside our camp who stands with us dies before sunrise. The old forge ticked as it cooled. Elias understood then. You wanted an outsider. "We wanted you," Mara said. He looked at her for a long moment. "I am not the kind of man a people should trust." "No," Mara said. "You are the kind Ashhawk cannot already own." The words struck harder than he expected. Elias had spent 12 years moving from town to town, leaving before dawn, sleeping with one hand near a gun. He had buried friends, lied about his name, and learned that a man with no home could survive almost anything, because nothing could be used against him. "I don't marry strangers," he said. Mara did not flinch. "And I do not beg men who came to buy my body off a plank." Nita's hand went to her knife. Sela looked away. Mara's voice softened, but only a little. "We did not choose you because you are kind. We chose you because once, when nobody was watching, you were." Before Elias could ask what she meant, the front door exploded inward. 5 riders rushed through the dust with rifles raised. Ashhawk had not waited for morning. The first shot shattered the lantern. Darkness slammed into the room. Elias moved before thought. He dragged Sela behind the forge, fired twice, and dropped the first man in the doorway. A second rider vaulted over the workbench. Nita met him in the dark. The knife from her sleeve flashed once, screamed, and fell backward into the ashes. Mara snatched a fallen rifle, worked the lever with bloody fingers, and fired into the doorway. The blast lit her face for half a second. She was not helpless. None of them were. They had been bound in the street because they allowed it. They fought like women who had expected the trap to close. The last 2 riders ran for their horses. Elias followed them into the moonlight and shot the reins from one saddle. The horse bolted. The rider hit the dirt hard enough to stay there. When silence came back, the blacksmith shop smelled of powder, blood, and cold iron. Elias turned to the sisters. "Run without me," he said. Mara lowered the rifle. "No, we could have died without you. That is different." They rode before the moon reached the center of the sky. 4 horses moved south through dry washes and mesquite shadow. Elias rode ahead, but not far enough to pretend he was alone. Behind him, the sisters kept pace without complaint. Near dawn, when the desert turned blue, Mara brought her horse beside his. "You asked why you," she said. "I did. 7 winters ago, at Nopal Ford, soldiers were dragging a boy by a rope behind a supply wagon. He had stolen corn because his mother was starving. A gunman rode out of the dust, broke the rope, and carried him across the arroyo. Then he left before anyone could thank him." Elias stared at the pale horizon. "I don't remember his name." "I do," Mara said. "His name was Tahu. He was my little brother." The reins shifted in Elias's hand. "I thought he died. He lived 3 more years, long enough to laugh again, long enough to tell my father there was one white gunman whose hands were not only for killing." Elias had no answer for that. For years he had carried his past like an empty canteen, useful only because it reminded him not to expect anything from it. But now this woman had pulled one small act from the dust, stood in front of him like proof. Not proof that he was good, proof that he had not been empty the whole time. They reached Red Willow Camp 2 days later. It lay beneath pale cliffs where pinyon smoke curled into the morning. Women stopped grinding corn. Children froze beside the horse pens. Warriors stepped from the shade with rifles in their hands. At the center of the camp, beside the council fire, Ashhawk was waiting. He was broad-shouldered, silver-haired, and dressed in a blue coat taken from a cavalry officer. The coat looked too clean for the camp. That was the first thing Elias noticed. Second was the rawhide cord tied around Ashhawk's wrist. The same cord that had bound Mara. Ashhawk raised his voice. My brother's daughters return with the man who bought them. They bring a stranger into our fire and call it honor. A murmur moved through the people. Mara dismounted. They return because you sold them. Ashhawk smiled. I sold no daughters. I sent 3 disobedient women away before they brought sickness to our council. If this gunman paid coin, that shame is theirs. He lifted a folded paper, the auction bill. The crowd saw ink. They saw marks. They saw the white man's seal. That was enough to make doubt spread like smoke. Then a thin voice came from inside the chief's lodge. Bring them. 2 women pulled the hide flap aside. Chief Red Willow lay on a low bed, thinner than a shadow, with a fever cloth over his chest. But his eyes were open. Mara went to her knees. Nita and Sela knelt beside her. Elias stayed outside the circle until the old chief lifted one finger toward him. The camp watched the gunman step forward. Chief Red Willow spoke with effort. You cut a rope at Nopal Ford. Elias removed his hat. I did. You cut another in Red Bluff. Yes. The chief's eyes moved to Mara. Did my daughter choose this man? Mara's answer carried across the camp. I did. Not as master, not as owner, as witness, as shield, as the man Ashhawk could not purchase before we arrived. Ashhawk's face darkened. This is trickery. No, Mara said. This is the law you forgot because you thought fear had made everyone silent. Ashhawk drew his pistol. That was the moment the camp split open. Men loyal to Ashhawk fired from the horse pens. Red Willow warriors answered from the lodge line. Women dragged children behind water jars. Horses screamed. Smoke rolled against the cliffs. Elias reached for Mara, but she was already moving. Nita cut the legs from a gunman rushing the lodge. Sela fired from behind a grain basket with both eyes open and no tears on her face. Between her father's lodge and the council fire, working the rifle like the whole camp had narrowed to one duty. Ashhawk pushed through the smoke toward the chief's bed. Elias met him at the lodge entrance. Their pistols came up together. Ashhawk fired first. The bullet tore across Elias's side and drove him to one knee. Pain flashed white through him. Ashhawk stepped closer. You are not one of them, he said. You are a hired ghost with no people. Elias looked past him. He saw Mara, blood on her cheek, still standing. He saw Nita dragging Sela out of a line of fire. He saw the old chief trying to rise, with nothing left in his body but will. And for the first time in years, Elias understood that having no people had never made him free. It had only made him easy to bury. He came up from one knee and drove his shoulder into Ashhawk's ribs. The pistol flew from Ashhawk's hand. They hit the dust hard. Ashhawk was stronger, but Elias fought like a man who had finally found ground under his feet. Mara kicked the fallen pistol away. Ashhawk reached for a knife. Nita shot it from his hand. The crack of her rifle ended the whole camp's breath. Ashhawk stared at the blade lying in the dust. His voice rose, broken but clear. Enough. The firing stopped in pieces. One rifle, then another, then the last horse crying against the rope. Chief Red Willow was carried to the council fire. Mara stood before him with Elias beside her. Not in front of her, not behind her, beside her. The chief took a narrow band of hammered silver from his own wrist. It was old, scarred, and dark in the grooves. He placed it across Mara's hand and Elias's hand together. This is witness, he whispered. This is burden. This is home, if both hearts choose it. Mara looked at Elias. There was no fear in her now, only the terrible honesty of asking for a life, not a rescue. Elias could have walked away. The debt was paid. The fight was won. No rope held him. No gun forced him. The desert behind him was wide enough for any man who wanted to disappear. Mara opened her fingers. "You are free, Elias Cade." He looked at the silver band, then at the sisters, then at the people watching from the smoke. He thought of a boy at Nopal Ford. He thought of 3 women standing bound in Red Bluff, letting the world mistake courage for defeat. He put his hand over Mara's. "I have been free for 12 years, he said. It was the loneliest thing I ever survived. Mara's eyes filled, but she did not look away. Elias turned to the council fire. "I stand with Mara Red Willow. I take the danger beside her. I do not claim her voice. I guard the space where it can be heard." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Chief Red Willow closed his eyes and smiled. Ashhawk was bound with the same rawhide he had used on the sisters. His men lowered their weapons. The council accepted Mara before the fire, with Nita and Sela at her shoulders, and Elias standing at her side. By sunrise, the camp had changed, not because a gunman bought 3 sisters, because 3 sisters had turned a bill of sale into a weapon, a stranger into a witness, and a forgotten mercy into the hinge of a whole people's future. Elias Cade had ridden into Red Bluff with no home and a pouch of silver. He left the council fire with a name spoken beside his own, a family that had chosen him, and a place under the hard western stars where running no longer felt like freedom.